The college experience was pretty terrible because my coach was pretty terrible. And I was going to a school that, although I got really good grades and good SAT scores, I was paid $0 to go to school there. And I had scholarships at other places, but this was just a better academic school. And so, our coach treated it as if we were at like a big time Division I program, even though we're Division III, and running like crazy during practice, during the season. And so it was very military based, and we would have like 100 people at our games, less than my high school game. So he sort of sucked the love out of basketball for me. But it was a great experience to play at a college level. Some of the teammates are still friends of mine. So that experience was great, but I had enough after about a year.
Yeah. Sometimes we have to experience, bad coaching, bad leadership to know what we don't want. Right. Or even what we do want. And yeah, sometimes, those experiences are just as important as having those great mentors and those great leaders as well.
Yeah.
Man, you said something about your dad and kind of the belief of going the travel agent route. What kind of led to that, and kind of where is that thinking at now as we look at where real estate is moving into the future?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Timing is always super important, and so '08 when I graduated, that was his belief, and his risk, and he thought that, hey, Andrew went to college, he went to a good school, he can do something else, kind of deal. And '09 for him was better than '08, and 10 was better than 9. And so his business started back growing again right after that little dip. And so when I joined in 2013, his opinion had completely changed on that, and that the business might look differently. There might be disruptors like we see all the time, but the relationships between client and realtor in a transaction, even if you're sophisticated, you don't really do this that often. And so that relationship, being able to call someone, at 7 p.m. on a Saturday, it's just hard to automate that. It's hard to automate that relationship. It's hard to, eliminate that with convenience. Some of these companies are doing. And so his view has definitely changed on that front. It was just sort of a time in history where he was going through a downturn, and he had that limiting belief. But, I think the realtor is going to be around a long time. It might look different. We might do our business different. We might have to learn different ways to get to the consumer. But it's a scary transaction and a scary thing for even the people that have done it a couple times. And so that relationship is vital. And so we sort of keep that at the forefront of our minds when we're marketing and building relationships, is that how can we solve a problem with the consumer? And that's done well for us, and we've continued to grow with that mindset.
Yeah. I think you and I are on the same page with that, as far as it very well could look a lot different. I still believe it's always going to come down to a decision of trust, and that you can't automate that. So
yeah,
I think it's super important. Before jumping on board, so you jumped on board in 13, just between college and 13. What the heck were you doing?
Yeah, so M&A investment banking. So the best way to explain that is companies would come to us. Usually we were lower middle market. So we're dealing with companies that, anywhere from 20 million of value to probably up to 250 million. So these were entrepreneurial led companies that would come to our investment bank in the division I worked in, and they would say, okay, I've built this company up, I want to sell it. And so we would run it's funny and sort of ironic. You run a similar kind of process as selling a house, but it's way on steroids, right? Like you come up with a financial model to prove to these investors what the company's worth. And then you put a marketing deck together, and it's not something you automate or pull off the shelf. It takes weeks to build out the presentation. And then you make outreaches to strategic buyers, buyers that might be bigger in their space that would want to purchase them, or financial buyers, the private equity guys. And so that's what I did for 6 years. So I started at an investment bank, and I was mostly doing healthcare M&A. So companies in the healthcare services space. And then to get back to Texas, I moved to a firm where I was still doing M&A, but in the industrial space. We actually tried to sell a home builder once. But industrials sort of loosely, that industry covered a lot of different kind of companies in that space. So yeah, that's what I was doing. I was mostly selling companies, but a bigger company might come to us and say, hey, I want to buy some companies. Can you do the opposite? Can you go reach out to smaller people in the space and try to see if they'd be interested in selling to us because they fit our, what we're trying to do. And so that's what I did for about 6 years.
That's awesome. That to me, I love that. Right. How much did that challenge your creativity?
Man, what it did was it taught me how to be a professional. It was the biggest sort of takeaway. And I say that because the investment banking world, when you start as an analyst, I was working 80, 90 hours a week. And so it really taught, and it was very structured and very, buttoned up kind of lifestyle. And so I saw the extreme of the professional world. Right? Like if you went to a happy hour and you said the wrong thing, it could be, a bad thing in your for your future, because it was a very polished and buttoned up lifestyle. You had to work your butt off. And so I wouldn't say it really helped my creativity, but it helped my professionalism. And then it also helped me figure out how to run a company. Like these were small companies when you compare them to like the companies JP Morgan or B of A would deal with, but these were companies that had 20 and 25 million and 50 million of EBITDA. Like that's crazy. That's like, the realtor world would be blown away. There might be, one or two guys in the entire country that have businesses that size in our space on the real estate sales side. So these were extremely successful companies, but they would run companies like they would run their divorce alimony through their company. So there was a lot to learn as a business operator because we saw the ins and outs of these companies we were going to sell.
Wow. That's like I said, man, to me, that's fascinating in just seeing the inner workings and how you have to bring it all together. And what, I can see the demand and stress on that. And what got you on board with your dad and into real estate?
So I had been promoted to senior analyst and then associate. And then the next role was to get to be vice president, which sounds fancier than it is. But it was about middle of the road. You started to have a revenue seat. So bring in some clients. You weren't just executing the deals. You would still do some execution, but for the most part, a VP to get to that director or managing director level would have to prove that they could bring in business. So I was a year away from that. And when I switched firms to get back to Texas, and I told my dad, like, man, everyone at the managing director level, like if they have a bad couple quarters, they're like worried that they're going to get fired, and they're on the road 3 days a week and having bad marriages and not great relationships with their kids because they would have to travel so much and just very cutthroat. And so I told my dad, I was like, I want to do it, get the vice president title, and then maybe come back and work for you for a couple years, and then I'll go to business school. And in investment banking, a lot of what you make is a bonus that you get one day a year. And so it would far exceed what your salary was. And this investment bank I was at basically screwed over everyone that year for bonuses, which banks will do it if they can get away with it. And so I got out of that meeting where I got my bonus, and I called my dad. I called my dad crying because I was pissed that I had worked for this company and they just screwed everyone over and said they were going to do one thing and did something else. And 2 weeks later, I had waited until the bonus, because it was still substantial. So I waited till the bonus hit my bank account and broke my lease in Dallas and moved to Houston. So it was more of it was thrown into me because I was sort of jaded by this industry that I'd been working my butt off for 6 years. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll give real estate a try. I want to be in Houston. That's what really drove it, is that family was super important to me. And so it was a way for me to get to Houston. And then best thing that's ever happened to me. But I didn't go in it with like, I really want to do this.
Yeah. I mean, you and I've talked about it. You know, a lot of people default right into this industry. I mean, I did, right. I came on board with Kinder on the back of the house operation integrator role. And I was like, hey, might as well get licensed. So that, you know, was for me. And we see that a lot. So, you know, you getting in, what you were doing for 6 years, how were you able to bring that and carry that into, you know, the business on the real estate side?
You know, my dad ran a very good relationship-based business, and he had a very good name, and then he had good people that would handle the transactions. But what I brought that he didn't do great of was the efficiencies of running a business from a P&L perspective. He did enough business and made really good money just because he brought in a lot of business. But like, I'll give you an example. He had a couple employees that their jobs were, they were in a car a lot. And so he would reimburse their mileage at whatever the IRS rate was. And he was paying about $100,000 a year in just reimbursement on mileage to these 3 W-2 employees. 2 of them had the same job, different territories. And one was like our runner that was doing signs and lock boxes, but we had a lot of listings. So it was a full-time position. And so, I'm here looking at the P&L a year into it, like, holy crap, he's paying $100,000 to reimburse mileage for employees for their own vehicles, right? And so I went in and did an analysis of like, what if we buy them these cars, and then we're not having to reimburse them at the 56.5 cents because they're driving company cars. We'll give them a gas card so they're not out money. And so that ended up costing us like 1/5 of the cost. And so I brought those kind of things because I knew what a P&L was. I knew sort of how to look at expenses and see what's broken, what's not broken, what can we tweak. And so a lot of that sort of business acumen, I would say, is investment banking gave me, where I sort of took my dad's very relationship-based business, which by any standard was super successful as a realtor. And I just sort of made some tweaks to run it a little bit more efficiently. And so that's why we've been able to grow. I strongly believe. I mean, he did I tell people he did the hard part. He did he got us to 150 million. Now we're at 600 million. We just haven't screwed it up. But a lot of that came from sort of looking at a P&L and seeing what we were doing wrong and trying to fix it.
Yeah, I love that. And what would you say? Because most real estate agents, they don't have a clue. They don't know. And where would you tell them, like, hey, here's some basic 101 you need to pay attention to really kind of understand and look at your business as a business and kind of understand what a P&L really is?